Hi, welcome to our virtual stakeholder event. We appreciate you joining us today. I am Ronna Starr, and I'm the President and CEO of APSCA. See if I can get my slides to turn. Try this one more time. Okay, there we go, perfect. Okay, hopefully we're off with no more technical difficulties. Before we start, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. The first one of those housekeeping items is I'm just going to quickly introduce you to everybody that's on the screen. We're then going to turn our webcams off just to make sure that we maintain the appropriate bandwidth and we don't distract you by any means. So firstly, on your screen, you'll see Mark Spears. He's one of our stakeholder board members, and I'll introduce him fully when we come to the panel in just a few moments. Carol Rice, our Code and Compliance Manager. She's going to speak to you momentarily as well. Avadi Safarian, who's our chair of our executive board chair. He'll be part of our panel shortly. Todd Nash is on our stakeholder board. And Kelly Jo Potts is our member services manager. She's going to speak to you, and Todd's going to be part of our panel. And Emma, stick your face over here. She's going to be monitoring the chat feature. So if you have any questions, you can pop that through. We're just going to pop our webcams off. I'll take you through some housekeeping and we'll get right into our presentations. We just want to make sure that you can all actively participate today. Most of you have probably joined using your computer speaker system. If you would prefer to join in the telephone or at any time you begin to have internet issues, please select the telephone from your audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You may need to change the country. We do have a variety of different country codes and phone numbers, so just work through that. If you do have any issues, you can submit those through the chat feature or the question pane, and our great IT support, Cheyenne, she'll be able to assist you, or Emma can provide some assistance as well. If you're also having technical difficulties, you can email the director box, and Emma will be keeping an eye on that today, and she'll respond to you or pass you on to Cheyenne, who can assist you. Following our 2 sessions today and then the 2 sessions that we had last week, we will be summarizing all of our Q&A, and we will share those with all of the participants and post it on our website. Today's session is also being recorded, and you'll receive an email in about 48 hours with a link to be able to view that recording. There we go. We want to keep the conversation going, so please follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn. During 2020, we also launched our APSCA YouTube channel, where we post videos of our webinars and other APSCA-related content. We also continue to be active across all social media and encourage you to follow and share and assist with spreading the word about APSCA and our ongoing progress. We appreciate you posting and sharing using this year's AGM and stakeholder event hashtags. APSCA's meetings are all conducted under Chatham House rule, which means that information disclosed during a meeting may be reported by those present, but the source of that information may not explicitly or implicitly be identified. We appreciate that you respect that rule. With our housekeeping out of the way, we're going to get into today's agenda. With our membership growing and being located in 96 countries, we've now grown to 101. And of course, along with COVID, we needed to think differently about how we were going to manage this year's event. We have pre-recorded 5 segments, plus posted our annual report, and you can find these all on our website. We have made 2 different webinars, which one was yesterday and one was today, in different time zones so that we can make sure that we can reach as many people as possible. So I'm going to take you through and introduce you to our APSCA team. Kelly Jo Potts, who I mentioned just a moment ago, is our Member Services Manager, and Carol Rice, our Code and Compliance Manager. Both are going to present on the topics that they cover in a few minutes. Emma Youngman, who's also here assisting with overseeing the chat today and watching the director email box. She, during her day job, is our Data Systems Coordinator. She supports our members with the enrolling of new auditors, assisting with updating information on their auditor profile. She's also supporting Carol on ethics and many other elements. Emma also used her creative skills to develop the slides that we're using today. Shannon is our certification coordinator. She's been the driving force behind the implementation of Part 3 exam, organizing with the interviewers, preparing to launch continuous professional development, and generally manages the director box, supporting exam translation and much more. Barbara Youngman manages the exam request sheets, issuing of exam results, reviewing exam integrity issues, audit logs, and more as well. Julie supports Barbara and recently came out of retirement to help us through an extremely busy year. Valda is our accounts team, and being a small team, we all do crossover and support each other as much as possible, so we can also be as responsive as possible to each of your emails. We do have 4 consultants that assist us in very specialist areas. Jonathan Ivelaw Chapman is our data privacy officer. Tim Linden is our senior advisor, ethics and integrity, and works very close with Carol. Heath Porteous manages our monthly newsletter, anniversary and annual report. And Simon Lennon has been overseeing our member firm application process. Our team has grown a lot in the last 2 years as APSCA has grown, and it's been wonderful to be part of this organization. Our annual general meeting was held last week, and we rolled out our 2021 executive board, and I'll introduce those to you in just a moment. But first, I'm going to start with our stakeholder board. Our stakeholder board is serviced by a dedicated multi types of people, ranging from independents, brand retailers, and collaborative program representation. And we have a member from each one of those 3 groups on the panel today, and we'll be speaking to them a bit later. We also have 3 representatives, again, 1 from each of the 3 categories, that sits on the executive board and represents the other members within the stakeholder community in general. The stakeholder board develop recommendations which support APSCA's mission and objectives. They review and consult on disciplinary matters, and they also nominate the chair, and as I mentioned, nominate the 3 representatives that also sit on the executive board. Just last week, we held our virtual executive board meeting, I should say, and so we decided to share this in-action photo of our executive board. You can see everybody there. We have Rajan Kalamanathan, who is from Bureau Veritas, Mark Spears, who you met just a moment ago, Avadi Safarian, who you also just met, Justin Beatty from Intertech, Effie Marinos from SGS, Greg Gardner from Arch Advisors, Randy Rankin from Eurofins, Frank Dorsers from TÜV Rhineland, and Brendan Morrissey, who is also on our stakeholder board and is our brand or retailer representative. So as we face the future together, and as APSCA continues to strive towards achieving our mission of enhancing the professionalism and credibility of the industry, I'm now going to hand you over to our Member Services Manager, Kelly Jo Potts, who's going to take you through APSCA's 2020 year in review.
Thank you, Rana. So for those of you who are new to APSCA, I'm Kelly Jo Potts, Member Services Manager. Thanks again for joining us today. I recognize 2020 was a challenging year for everyone, and yet we achieved so much as an organization and industry. So I did want to give us a brief year in review and take the opportunity to celebrate and acknowledge this year's achievements. I will remind those of you on the webinar today that for a deeper dive on some of these highlights mentioned, please view our Membership Achievements pre-watch video, which is available on our website online under the AGM and Stakeholder event page. You can also view our annual report, which is posted online, but is also available as a handout attached to today's webinar via your control panel. And just a reminder, if you have any questions during this presentation, you can pop those into the chat box, and we'll definitely queue these up for the Q&A portion at the end. So we have mentioned 2020 was a unique year. As such, adjustments were made to really better support our members. So in recognizing the financial and logistical impacts for many due to COVID, we provided the following. We delayed payment of membership fees. So that means member auditor and firms were given an extension on payment of membership fees, and payment plans were offered as needed. And member auditors were also given until the end of the calendar year to issue payment without impacts to their auditor status. We also adjusted exam due dates, and these are posted on our resource library page on the APSCA website. We also had to learn to accommodate for a high volume of exams. So with limited travel and many members now working from home due to impacts of COVID, APSCA saw an increase of auditors taking exams after March. which resulted in a high volume of tests across all parts of the exam. And all of the exams taken also require review. So as you can imagine, APSCA and the exam team were kept very busy, but we understood and we adjusted to support our test takers. We also increased member communications, so we provided ongoing and regular communication to our member firms and auditors, and we hosted webinars throughout the year to keep members updated. And we also saw the launch of our YouTube channel and the resource library, where we post the latest and current available resources for easy access. So these are just some of the ways in which we tried to support our membership. And for more, again, on this year's membership achievements, again, please just view the pre-watch video available online. Next, I'll touch on the membership makeup and provide a brief update on exams. So our industry commitment has really escalated since APSCA's formation, and to date, our organization is made up of 53 total member firms, of which 10 were new member firms for 2020. So those were new applicants. But again, you can always view a complete and current list of all our member firms on the APSCA member firm page on our website. And when it comes to our auditors, we have over 4,200 member auditors enrolled. So again, for more on our member firms, and if you're interested in the auditor breakdown by region, languages, and some of the other indicators that we have, please listen to our welcome pre-read video. And you can also view the member update section in our annual report. So now for CSCAs. Since the rollout of exams in November 2018, and the launch of Part 3 this year, we've seen the number of CSCAs grow every day, and as of today, we're glad to report we have 139 certified social compliance auditors. We really want to applaud these auditors on their achievement and hard work, and look forward to seeing this number grow dramatically during 2021. Now, once an auditor has received their CSCA certification, so this means they've sat and passed all 3 parts of the exam, they will obtain 2 things: a certificate from APSCA and a membership card. So their certificate will be posted and made available to the auditor via their APSCA account or profile, and separately, a membership card will be produced and distributed to the auditor. And the next slide will explain how you can also verify and view the information of our auditors. So if you ever wanted to verify an auditor's status, be it ASCA, RA, or CSCA status, or other membership details, you can do this by going to our APSCA website, and under the APSCA member auditor page, you'll see kind of a verification field. And this page itself is public. So here is where you can verify the auditor's information. So obviously the sample that you're seeing here is of Rana Starr. So this is a fake number. She's our sample auditor. But all you would need to enter to verify the auditor's information is their last name and their APSCA membership number. You do have to have both of these in order to run the verification on the site. So once you've entered that information, the following will display. So you'll get the auditor's name, their APSCA membership number, their level, and their membership status, and a photo for their ID. Now, if the auditor is for some reason not in good standing, inactive, or lapsed, their membership status field will display either in red, orange, or yellow for any of the designations that I mentioned earlier. So that's one area where you can take a look at verifying an auditor's information. So now I'll just give you an update on exams. Perfect. So APSCA's exam series contains 3 different styles of exams. We have part 1, which is 100 multiple choice and true/false questions, and it's currently undergoing enhancement as we prepare for the launch of 6 additional languages. And these are Thai, Italian, Portuguese, Turkish, Vietnamese, and Bengali. So that brings now our total number of exam languages to 10. And part 2 is a case study, which includes multiple choice, true, false, and short answer questions. Now, in order to be successful in the part 2 exam, auditors are required to triangulate information based on the details provided in their case study. And there are many possible scenarios available, and these are allocated randomly to test takers by the exam system. And part 3 is a one-on-one role play exam, which has the interviewer playing 3 different roles. Scenarios for this exam will include either an opening or closing meeting, plus 2 other possible scenarios, which are different types of interviews. So it might be interviewing a facility worker, a migrant worker, a supervisor, etc. Now, auditors must reach a score of 75% on each of the 3 exams to be considered a pass and be able to move on to the next exam. So auditors are required to pass part 1 before they can technically move into part 2 and then so on to part 3. Now it's once they've passed all 3 parts of the exam that they would qualify for CSCA. So that's our Certified Social Compliance Auditor. Now, if an RA auditor does not pass their exams, they are moved to the level of APSCA until they can pass that particular exam. And APSCA has done this to provide a level playing field in which all members are being held accountable when it comes to exams. So it's imperative that all auditors, regardless of their experience, prepare themselves for the exams and take this process seriously. Lastly, at a quick glance, we've had nearly 6,000 exams taken since APSCA first started with our pilot in October 2018. Part 3 has been a major focus for us this year. However, COVID has proven to be one of our larger hurdles, so we're working on a few more enhancements, which will hopefully enable us to overcome some of the IT and scheduling issues we've experienced. But having said that, we still managed to extend our total number of CSCA from 1% to our auditor base of 3%. And we do expect this number to grow much quicker during 2021. Again, for more on exams, please be sure to view our exams pre-watch video available online and exam updates covered in our annual report. And just lastly, for key dates, and as mentioned earlier, APSCA offers membership-related resources, key dates, and exam support materials on our resource library page. And there is where you'll find webinars, exam guides, and more. So we really encourage you to visit and make use of those helpful resources. And with that, I will now pass you over to my colleague Carol to give us the update on ethics.
Thank you, Kelly Jo. Let me get the next slide up. Hi, everyone. I do appreciate having an opportunity to talk with you about ethics and integrity. As you know, it's very much a core value for APSCA and very central to APSCA's mission. And as the Code and Compliance Manager, my overall goal is to focus on initiatives and practices which will ultimately improve ethics and integrity in the auditing industry as a whole. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about the specifics of our standards on which our program is based, APSCA's disciplinary procedures and the structure of our disciplinary boards, the types of allegations we receive, and what we expect of firms in terms of their investigations, the steps we take after receiving an allegation from a member firm. So APSCA's Code and Standards of Professional Conduct was developed with the goal of setting the highest of ethical standards and expectations for our members. And the main ethics requirements of the codes are broken down into several different categories, including compliance with laws, and this is not exhaustive, but it gives you just a sampling of how it is actually structured. The fact that independent auditing, which is supposed to be done in such a way that it does prevent conflict of interest. Members must audit with integrity and competence. APSCA expects that auditors do have a minimum level of industry-specific knowledge and skills, and that audits are completed by auditors at the correct status and also the correct level. And there must be transparency in the sharing of information with APSCA from both member firms and auditors. So in terms of our disciplinary procedures, the Framework and Procedures Manual is the main reference for the processes that we follow in handling ethics cases, and it does provide the framework for everyone to explain our disciplinary boards. And this document can be found on our website in the Ethics and Integrity section under About Us. So there are 2 disciplinary boards and an appeals board, and both disciplinary boards are led by the Senior Advisor of Ethics, who is a lawyer by trade. And then the Disciplinary Board for Member Auditors is also made up of 2 member firm representatives and 1 independent member who is also a lawyer in labor and employment. And the disciplinary board for member firms has 4 remaining members who are independent from APSCA. And then we have the appeals board for auditors, who is led by the chair of the executive board and 2 stakeholder board member representatives, neither of whom are from member firms. And the APSCA executive board is the appeals board for member firms. This chart breaks down the types of allegations we have received since 2018 by year. And the thing to remember is that even if the member firm has substantiated the allegation that's showing here, it is the disciplinary board who will ultimately decide whether the code was violated and the resulting sanction, which may impact the auditor's membership status. The first 4 categories of allegations may be referred to a disciplinary board, but as you can see, exam integrity is the most common allegation listed here, and the substantiation and the sanction decisions related to exam integrity is usually decided by the CEO, but exam integrity cases with greater severity may be referred to the disciplinary board. Allegations against member firms are reported directly to APSCA, and we may request authorization from the chair of the executive board to conduct an independent investigation. And once that investigation is complete, the disciplinary procedures for member auditors and member firms are very similar. So the APSCA disciplinary process begins when a member firm receives an allegation of misconduct which may violate APSCA's code. The source of the allegation may be from, many different potential sources: a client, a factory, it may be from a collaborative program, another auditor, or an anonymous reporter. And based on the APSCA disciplinary procedure, the member firm is expected to investigate based on our guidelines, which are found in the code and standards. And this gives you a little details of what our expectations are in terms of the allegation. We do expect that the firm can ensure that the investigation is consistent, fair, credible, and avoids conflict of interest. The firm should also provide the subject with an investigation, an opportunity to be heard. And when misconduct is substantiated, the firm is expected to take appropriate disciplinary action. And finally, the firm then informs APSCA no later than 45 days after the disciplinary decision by completing the notice of disciplinary action form. Once we receive this report, the firm should expect to respond to inquiries from APSCA for clarification of details, additional information, or in some cases, additional evidence. So the disciplinary action form is a form that provides APSCA with the details of the allegation, the investigation, supporting evidence, and the member firm conclusion. And we do expect that this will be submitted to APSCA even if the auditor resigns during the investigation. In that particular situation, we expect the member firm to complete the investigation, and APSCA may decide to take the case to the disciplinary board to review for possible APSCA sanction, even if the auditor left the firm before the firm was able to take disciplinary action. Once APSCA has a full understanding of the case, we will send a rights and process letter to notify the auditor of the allegation. The letter includes details of the allegation, information that the member firm has provided about the case and their investigation, the member firm conclusion, and the possible code violation. And we ask for the auditor to respond within 30 days. And in most cases, APSCA does not extend the investigation beyond the information provided by the firm and the auditor. However, if we are aware of an allegation that the member firm does not investigate, or we feel that the investigation process and result from the member firm did not follow our guidelines, we may choose to conduct an independent investigation. So once we have sufficient information and evidence on the case, we'll prepare a report specifically for review by the disciplinary board for member auditors. The information in the report does not identify the member firm involved, the auditor, the reporter, or the name of the people interviewed. The report provides the detail of the case in a consistent and standardized format and reports data and member firm evidence without a point of view. The disciplinary board for member auditors will then meet and discuss and act on the case. And if they decide to substantiate the allegation based on the evidence provided, they'll then decide on an appropriate sanction while also considering previous cases with similar allegations and how they were handled. It's important to maintain consistency. Once the board has made a decision, APSCA will explain to the auditor the impact of the allegation, the decision, and the potential impact of the sanction on their APSCA membership status. The communication will also provide information on their right to petition for an appeal of the disciplinary board decision, but it does require the auditor to submit grounds on which they are appealing the decision, and they must do that within 45 days. The appeals board will consider cases when a member firm has submitted this petition within the 45 days and there are clear stated grounds as to why the decision made by the disciplinary board should be reviewed. After considering the case, if the appeals board does so, they will decide whether the original decision should be overturned or not. If the disciplinary board decision is overturned, the appeals board may decide the allegation was not substantiated or may amend the original sanction for a substantiated allegation. So taking a look at 2020, I just wanted to point out some of the things that we're focused on this year and then give you a little bit of insight into 2021. But during 2020, we did make some changes and updates in the disciplinary framework and procedures document to further clarify the appeals process and also very clearly state how a member firm would reinstate after revocation of membership. We also put together the new disciplinary action form, which I talked about earlier. And then we also took all of the ethics and integrity expectations from the code and put it into one document called the disciplinary action, called the guidance document. And it was created to highlight the key ethics and integrity expectations from the code. And then we recently started providing auditors with the opportunity to present their cases during the board meeting and then respond to disciplinary board questions. And the 2020 member firm ethics report will be completed by member firms shortly and submitted in February. It will give us details about their ethics and integrity complaints that they received in 2020. And additionally, we're asking for a little bit more detail about their program, and it will be online this year so that we will be better able to put that data together and actually do some useful analysis for everybody. And then a look at 2021, we're beginning to do more outreach to members. I have been contacting member firms to discuss their ethics and integrity program. That'll continue in 2021, and the purpose of that is to, see how we can support them, see if they have questions, if there is, what we can do to make certain that they have the best internal ethics program, for themselves. We will also consider investigations of member firms when we receive credible allegations of misconduct or when members may not be meeting the ethics procedures and expectations as we outline in the code. We'll continue to increase routine communications with the intent to educate members on ethics procedures and expectations. And then we're taking a number of steps to simplify our own internal tracking of ethics violations to make sure that that information is available to the whole team and that we make certain that we are tracking those in the way that's going to be most useful for everybody. That concludes my presentation. I thank you and I wish all of you a happy and healthy new year, and back to you, Rana.
Great, thanks. As APSCA continues to look ahead, at all times we remain focused on ensuring that all goals that we establish will see us move towards the realization of our vision and mission. APSCA operates under 5 pillars: validation, governance, ethics, and integrity. Underpinning those 3 pillars are communication and supporting processes and systems. I'm going to touch briefly on our activities over the coming months within these pillars and encourage you to watch our video for more information on strategy. Validation, our main focus within this pillar is the expansion and accessibility of the CSCA exam. The addition of 6 languages will see us grow from approximately 80% of our auditors having access to the CSCA exam to approximately 90%. This 10% gap still represents more than 400 auditors. We encourage you to keep an eye out on our resource library as documents continue to be uploaded as translations are finalized. We will note the completion and complete the launch dates of the exam within the newsletter as well as member communications. Part 1 of the exam has recently received a complete rewrite, and those questions are being translated and uploaded. We're implementing continuous professional development, and note that within the code and standards of professional conduct at the bottom of page 1, we say that the RAs are treated as if they are a CSCA during the interim rollout process. Therefore, both the RAs and CSCAs are required to submit their completed CPD annually, starting in 2021. And to support this, we're working with our IT team and to set up a place for auditors, which will enable them to directly upload their CPD training that they participate in to their auditor profile to make it easier for them. CPD also requires an ethics component as well, and we recognize that many of our audit firms regularly conduct training for their auditors as they prepare to either sit exams, refresh on various audit programs, or client expectations. The intent is to recognize these trainings and allocate an appropriate number of CPD hours for those trainings. APSCA continues to work with our stakeholders to facilitate ongoing recognition of our work with the intent to remove duplicated efforts that exist within the industry, whilst ensuring APSCA continues to add value. We've recently signed MOUs with 3 of the collaborative programs and will commence discussion with them in the new year as to how we will roll this out, and we will continue to keep you appraised of our progress. Governance focuses on the overall effectiveness of the organization to act with independence and integrity. We do this via our executive and our stakeholder boards to ensure the efficient running of the organization. The executive board meets monthly. We have a treasurer and a finance committee, as well as an HR committee that has oversight as to APSCA's governance. Finances, particularly this year, are noted regularly on the executive board agenda regarding our current and forecasted positions. We have implemented a number of new policies that are in the process of rolling out, and we've developed pre-watch videos for our members on these policies. We continue to be focused on keeping our fees as low as possible, and to do that, we focus on developing ways in which we can streamline our processes, enable firms to access relevant information via the APSCA data system, and working with partners to remove duplicated efforts. Another new area for 2021 is within our executive board. Our B and C member representatives will be holding webinars with their cohort to discuss emerging issues, upcoming topics for the executive board discussion, and so we can hear from our membership and share their perspective during executive board meetings. The first call is being organized for January and will be held over multiple times as required to reach our membership. Carol spoke to you about ethics and integrity, and I want to encourage you to watch her pre-watch video, which is posted on our website. Our member firms have the responsibility to submit quarterly and annual reports. Those quarterly reports document the number of times a member firm may have used an incorrect level of auditor. This could have been because of COVID and auditors cannot cross borders. A local auditor may have fallen ill or failed an exam, and due to the timing, they were unable to develop an alternative or prepare an alternative auditor for the audit. We require reporting of this, which also includes what the corrective and preventative action plan may be. If the gap is identified by one of the brands or retailers who submit this information to us monthly, we can review and provide a correct next step. A point to note, if a client does state that they don't care whether a firm uses an APSCA enrolled auditor for social compliance audit, this actually doesn't change the requirement as noted within the code. As per APSCA's member and as per the code and standard of professional conduct, which says all member firms and auditors have signed, if it is an audit for social compliance, as per APSCA's definition, the requirement to use an APSCA enrolled auditor at the correct level stands. A client cannot give permission for an APSCA member to violate the code. As mentioned a moment ago, we do receive on a regular basis a list of audits which have been conducted by auditors at an incorrect level from various organizations. That information is checked, and if found to be accurate, the auditor is therefore presented to the Code and Compliance Manager for next steps. Annual reports are submitted by firms Q1 each year, which identify complaints received, how they were handled, the number that were substantiated and unsubstantiated. This information is consolidated and compared with like-sized member firms. All information gained will be considered and followed up where gaps are noted. During 2021, a working group is reviewing the use of APSCA member number on limited scope, or what is also known as a non-traditional social compliance audit. We define non-traditional or maybe limited scope audit to include remote assessments, audits which may have components of social compliance but may not contain every element as noted within APSCA's definition. More information will be shared on this. However, please note at this stage, an APSCA member number can only be used on an audit that meets APSCA's definition of a social compliance audit or more. As mentioned, we have two pillars which underpin the three that we just spoke about. Their communications and their supporting processes and systems. There's been a lot of work done in these areas to continuously improve how we share information with members and stakeholders through our website, newsletter, and member communications. There's also been a number of data system enhancements that we've implemented during 2020, and we have a lot more planned for 2021. Which is set to enable our member firms to be able to see more information on associated auditors, as well as streamline the way in which we invoice for membership fees, the handling of the request of exams, etc. APSCA's journey to work with the industry to achieve our vision and mission is a long and never-ending journey, and the ongoing support by stakeholders who recognize the progress that we are achieving, where we are continually seeing more and more brands, retailers, and collaborative programs stating that they will only accept audits from an APSCA member firm, speaks to the recognition of our progress and moving towards our achieving of success. We're now going to transition from our strategy into our last segment prior to Q&A. So I want to encourage you again to submit any questions that you might have through the chat feature so we can consolidate those. So many of you are probably aware that APSCA is the 6th attempt by the industry to professionalize. The first attempt came nearly 20 years ago. And whilst APSCA is the 6th attempt, we do not refer to those previous 5 as failures. To quote author Rochelle E. Goodrich, many times what we perceive as an error or a failure is actually a gift. And eventually we find that the lessons learned from that discouraging experience proved to be of great worth. If you ever get an opportunity to speak with any of our founding members, many of whom were part of those earliest attempts, and maybe even some of them all the attempts, they'll tell you that when they sat down to start APSCA, the conversation was about how could we learn from those lessons and how can we benefit and ensure that APSCA is the 6th and final attempt, which is actually successful. I think thanks to our founding members' foresight and the ongoing persistence by all, APSCA has managed to get to where we are today, and we're excited to celebrate that 5-year anniversary from when the founding members actually put out that initial press release. Now, one of the lessons that were learned in those previous 5 rounds of experience was ensuring that all interested parties had a seat at the table. It doesn't mean that everybody can be here at all times, but having representatives from those 3 legs of the industry is extremely important. And also it supports APSCA membership, being both our firms and our individual auditors. One of those first experiences that implemented by the founding members was that stakeholder board. And I mentioned all the members of our stakeholder board earlier. Our stakeholder board has the representatives from the 3 legs of the stool that you'll see on the screen right now, which one person from each of those groups represented on the executive board. This stakeholder board actually started around September of 2016. In a minute, you're going to hear from the different, an individual representing each of those legs of the stool, and we're going to host that on a panel in just a moment. It's very important that we have 3 strong legs of the stool supporting the APSCA membership in order for APSCA to be able to remain strong. That stakeholder board and that three-legged stool mentality carried forth into the working groups that started around mid-2016 and ultimately formulated the competency framework and the code of conduct that you'll see on our website today. Now, I am going to ask that our three panelists, actually, and I'll do the same thing, that we're going to turn on our webcams. See if I can find my mouse here. We're going to turn on our webcams, and I'm going to introduce you to each one of these fantastic people. So Avadis Safarian is our president and CEO of RAP. Avadis has been on the stakeholder board since the inception in September 2015 and remains the chair of our executive board. He was elected to that position for our first executive board, which started in November of 2016. Avadis has been an amazing partner to me all this time as well. Appreciated his partnership. Todd Nash, he's a more recent addition to our stakeholder board, and having been part of our group since midway through last year, so about 18 months into it. Todd is a director of responsible sourcing for the Home Depot and has also been in this industry for probably more than 15 years, I think, Todd, right?
Yes. Yep.
Now, Mark Spears, yesterday I called him a pioneer. I don't know if I offended him or not yesterday, but I do consider him certainly as a pioneer of this industry. And I think that he's been part of, if not all, then pretty much all of the attempts to professionalize the industry. Prior to Mark taking on the independent role, and prior to his retirement from his previous gig, he worked at Disney for many, many years. And as I said, it was part of some of these very, very early attempts to professionalize the industry. So we were quite excited when at the end of last year, we were able to recruit him to be an independent member of our stakeholder board. And as of December last year, became also a member of our executive board. So first of all, I want to thank you all very much and welcome you to the panel. We are going to build on last year's panel, and last year's panel was actually led by another executive and stakeholder board representative, Brendan Morrissey from Walmart, and he focused that panel on the impact of APSCA on the industry. That panel included representatives from the collaborative program, which was Ethical Toy. It also had what then was a new member firm, which is Amiga Compliance. And then we had an auditor who had just been through the CSCA process and was about to be awarded her CSCA certification, which we had the luxury of doing in person last year. And so I'm just going to build on that with this particular panel. If any of you want to have a look at that last panel, it is actually on our website under our 2019 AGM and stakeholder event. So APSCA's 5 years old, and in the early stages of executing our CSCA examination process. And I'm going to ask the same question of each of the three of you, and I'm going to start with Todd to get your perspective, and then we'll move on to Avadis and then on to Mark. But from your leg of the stool, again, remembering the leg that we're representing, from the perspective, how has APSCA provided a benefit to the industry overall?
Yes, great question. Thank you first for the opportunity to share some of the thoughts from the Home Depot tonight. We have a fairly extensive audit program at the Home Depot. We did over 3,000 audits and corrective action visits in 38 countries last year. And based on our observations to date, one of the things we're seeing is that some of the APSCA member firms are reassigning auditors from time to time for our audits and corrective action visits. The main reason for these auditor replacements is actually due to originally assigned auditors failing a recent APSCA test and needing to undertake more training and subsequent re-exam for qualification. At the Home Depot, we see this as a healthy extension of the process in ensuring our responsible sourcing audits are conducted by experienced and qualified auditors, thus resulting in a better audit quality for all of us. One additional way APSCA has helped us and the industry relates to the use of subcontractors. In some geographies where resources are insufficient, we've seen that APSCA qualification is a way to help ensure performance and that integrity expectations are also met.
I think, Todd, laid a good foundation for that basic question of what the value is that APSCA brings, how the industry at large has benefited. And I can give you a sort of a similar response from the point of view of the collaborative programs and how we have benefited from APSCA. And it really goes to that core mission that APSCA was founded on, which is to professionalize this industry, to professionalize social compliance auditing. Folks on this call, and certainly everybody on this panel, knows fully well that as an industry, this is still a fairly nascent one. It's been around for maybe 2.5 decades at best. If you went to a factory, 30 years ago and asked to do a social audit or asked to see a social compliance certificate, they'd laugh at you. They wouldn't know what you were talking about. It emerged in the mid to late 1990s under conditions that were prompted by a lot of bad press and a lot of activist NGO exposés that really meant that folks felt under pressure to move quickly and to move, decisively, independently, what have you, all of which led to this sudden development of an activity, social compliance auditing, without any real sense of the parameters for what it takes to do that job right. If you look around at other professions, lawyers, doctors, chartered accountants, you don't get to simply call yourself one just because you feel like it. There are strict criteria. There's a path to get there. There's a certain measure of aptitude that you have to pass before you can give yourself that appellation. But for social compliance auditing, one had not existed and certainly was not around when the industry was first burgeoning. So the need for that became quite apparent over the course of the first decade and a half of the enterprise, and that's the value that APSCA brings, because without that central body that acts as the professional licensing authority, for want of a better way of putting it, organizations like mine and even Todd for that matter, folks that are out there promulgating a program, have to take it upon themselves to qualify all the auditors that go and do the audits for them. Every RAP auditor had to go through a very complicated process to meet that qualification for us to be confident that they can go ahead and do that work. To get that foundation being laid through an APSCA accreditation process, through the CSCA's that we heard about, 139, that's amazing, we're up to 3%. That number is going to keep climbing, is a tremendous service to the industry at large, and especially so to the collaborative programs who are able to then have this credible and reliable mechanism by which to qualify auditors and be able to then provide the service. Because at the end of the day, what we're all in the business of is an exercise fundamentally based on trust. And so to have that ability to say this process carried out by this individual at this location can be trusted because of the qualifications that went into ensuring that it was done appropriately is extremely important and a very valuable contribution to the industry by APSCA.
Let me try to pick up on Avidiz's energy in terms of expressing this, but I'm appreciative of being able to participate in the meeting today, and also privileged to serve as a member of both the stakeholder and executive boards. I'm also representing two other independent stakeholder board members, Elizabeth Bystrom, who's Director of Capacity Building at Goodweave International, and also Doug Kahn, who's the founder of the Kahn Group. On the topic of Pioneer, I think everyone in this meeting will agree that Todd clearly exemplifies the visual of Pioneer far better than I do. But also, I do want to recognize two pioneers that I'm sure are on this call who were involved in the initial attempt at establishing this association 20 years ago, and that is Greg Gardner of Arch Advisors and Randy Rankin of Eurofins. I mean, it's people like that who have continued to carry forward the intent and intention of this association through trial and tribulation, and as you point out, Rana, through the learnings of those, resulting in something that we can all be proud of and that continues to strengthen over time on learnings and participation. I would underscore, in terms of value, going back to the mission of APSCA, being to enhance professionalism, consistency, and credibility of those involved, whether you be a firm, whether you be an auditor. The output of that for me, partly in my prior roles, but I think in those that rely on the output of the profession, is really confidence. It goes back to Avidis's notion of trust. We have to be confident about the output of this work. Decisions are made on these outputs. Risk management depends on these outputs. Brand reputation depends on the output. Consumers, investors, lenders, others continually asking for this kind of information, and it's critical and important, and grateful for those that have really pushed forward, that we sit here today talking from a position of strength with the future ahead of us.
Yeah, you raised some really good points, all three of you, and certainly the trust and the confidence. I mean, APSCA's vision is to be those trusted professionals. So it's obviously a very long journey, but I'm glad to hear from you that we're making the progress in that area of gaining that confidence and then just gaining that trust. Now, the next question I have is actually going to be a specific question for each one of you. So Avidis, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. How do you see the certification of auditors, especially as the numbers grow in 2021, assisting in removing the duplicated efforts by laying the foundation for the expectation of social compliance auditors with RAP and other collaborative programs to enable you to build off of that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rana, and in a way it actually builds a little bit on a part of the answer I gave to the previous question. In the pre-APSCA world, before we had this mechanism of accrediting auditors, examination process, and the sort of culminating in a CSCA designation, all the collaborative programs, and as I mentioned, all organizations that fielded audit programs of any stripe had to fend for themselves when it came to the issue of qualifying the auditors, to making sure that they had the confidence that Mark spoke of, the trust that I was referring to, that they could go out there and do the work to the level that it needed to be done, which meant that all these programs had to stand up their own training and qualification procedures and had to maintain them. And RAP was no exception at the time. We have a 5-day course that every auditor has to take, pass an exam at the end, and then have a refresher course done every other year in order to be accredited by us to do audits. What the APSCA process will enable us to do is to not need that foundation qualifying function to be executed by us anymore. That 5-day course that I referenced went through the whole process of making sure that somebody knew what a social audit was, and then eventually brought them to learning about what a RAP audit was. Now we only need that last part, because it's an APSCA qualified CSCA. We are confident knows social audits, knows what it means, knows what it takes, understands the process. All we have to do to make them ready to do RAP audits now is just tack on that last piece about the RAP processes and the RAP template, which of course is not going to be a 5-day process. It'll be a much shorter process, which will be much more efficient and therefore, again, a great service to the industry. And it really will reduce duplication, because all of my peers are in the same situation, right? They have to qualify everybody for their programs. Now, each of them will likewise only have to add that last piece that, ratifies the auditor, or whatever the appropriate term for them would be. There are some things you do not want to be pioneering in, and more training programs is one of them. We don't need that. We've got other things we can do. And Mark, I have to say, pioneer is a good look for Todd. Maybe profit might even be a better one. So we've got a good visual going here. So we're
counting on it.
All of which is to say that I prophesy a great improvement in the auditor qualification process for all the players, because we will have APSCA to rely on to build that foundation upon which then individual programs will simply have to layer on what makes their program unique. So a great opportunity and a great service for the space.
And just to add on to that as well is removing that duplicated effort is great. We're saving time, but we're also saving money, right?
Yeah.
So we're driving these efficiencies into the organization as a whole. So, I know one question that we get quite a bit, and hopefully I'm not stealing anybody's question that they're submitting through the chat box, but some of the questions that we get is, is there all the work that APSCA's doing, or how is it going to impact on cost of audits? And of course, we're not going to go down the antitrust challenge here, but because we don't ever talk about costs, we don't talk about what we charge or anything else, but we are always looking at how can we be cost effective, how can we, we're not trying to add cost to the system, and certainly Abadis, what you talk about now is actually going the other way, right? We're helping to remove some cost from the system and be more efficient.
Indeed.
So Todd, we're going to round you out with this question here. Is what recommendation would you provide? Oh, sorry, Mark, I skipped you. I'm so sorry. We got to talking about you before, and I just jumped over you. So I do want to.
It's quite all right. I jumped to Todd too.
So, Mark, where do you see as an independent stakeholder board member that you can provide insight to APSCA as we strive to achieve our vision of being that trusted professional? Where should we focus?
I think broadly speaking, when we think about the stakeholder board, the stakeholder board plays a unique role in the APSCA process in terms of advancing professional standards, because we are able to bring a broad perspective in terms of the implication of the industry and the profession, also bringing forward topics that may not always surface through the firms and the auditors, but what we might be able to envision will have an impact on the industry, and we'll talk about that perhaps more in a second. And then we're also able to offer some objective participation and activity in the governance and disciplinary processes. Specific to the independent stakeholders, again, I think because we might have some unique networks and experience and roles and responsibilities outside of the framework of the profession and the responsible business work that's going on with supply chain, I think we are able to offer a unique voice that may not naturally reside within any other constituency within APSCA and within the board organization, as well as highlighting some of the key topics of the day that we can bring back for conversation and consideration with the board.
Great, thanks. And it's such an important role, as you said. There's a very different observations and thinkings able to come from that independent group. So we do appreciate the value you guys bring. Now, Todd, sorry, I nearly got you excited there for a moment, but here we go, now to you. So what recommendations would you provide to other brand or retailers regarding APSCA being embedded into how you've implemented your social compliance program, or how you continue to execute your social compliance program?
Yeah, so like myself, many of my peers at other retailers and brands depend on audits as an integral part of their program. As I said earlier, it's so important to ensure that we have experienced and qualified auditors. So let me try and answer that by taking a moment to just share some of our current practices and the approach that we've used for APSCA. So first off, we require all audits and all auditors supporting the Home Depot that they must be APSCA registered and working towards their CSCA. We're delighted, as Avadi said earlier, that 3% of the auditors have now reached that CSCA level. And once APSCA hits a critical mass, we are going to require that all auditors performing Home Depot audits are CSCAs. In addition, we also require auditors to place their APSCA number on the audit report entered onto our internal audit system. I know it's a requirement for the audit firms in their systems to make sure that an audit number is there, but we don't use their audit forms. We don't use their necessarily their processes. And so it's important that we verify each auditor is indeed a registered auditor in good standing. Any subcontractors used for Home Depot audits must be pre-approved with a valid APSCA number. Again, so important for those subcontractors to make sure that we're holding them to the same standard as we are for all auditors. And then we have also started to track and analyze auditor performance. And then what we do is, if there are integrity issues, we are reporting those to APSCA and to the member firms to make sure that they're dealt with appropriately, as you heard earlier from Carol. One other area where APSCA has changed our program is the acceptance of shared reports. So historically, we only accepted the use of shared reports through top tier firms. But now, with the confidence instilled through certification and oversight by APSCA, we now consider acceptance of reports issued by any qualified full member APSCA firm. So with that said, my advice and I urge all retailers and brands to really consider taking similar steps, support APSCA, and improve your responsible sourcing programs.
Great, thanks very much, Todd. I appreciate that. So just before we move over to our Q&A, and if you haven't already submitted your question, please do so. We have plenty of time to answer all of your questions. We do have a few questions here, which is great. Well, I have one final question for our panelist here, and in the spirit of caring and sharing, Mark, we're going to start with you this time, and then we will go to Todd, and then we will close off with Avidis. So just one word of, if you have one word of advice, one piece of advice or a word of caution that you would have for APSCA as we head into 2021 and beyond, knowing that 2020 was a bit of a crazy year and we don't necessarily know what 2021 brings, but taking into account what we do know, if you have one piece of advice or a word of caution that you would give to us to think about and consider, what would that be?
So let me think about that in two ways. One is really a topic that we have started to talk about internally from an APSCA perspective, and that is thinking about the scope of the profession and the constitution of a social compliance audit, and the fact that given the current environment, the pandemic, the disruption or access to facilities, one of the topics that the independent stakeholders have been particularly adamant about is asking, asking APSCA to reconsider limited scope assessment as part of the professional standards umbrella. APSCA, in its wisdom, initially focused specifically on the comprehensive or full scope audit, social compliance audit, through definition and through the application of the membership and the accreditation process. The world's changed, and while it may have been changing, certainly this year the change accelerated, and the evaluation of working conditions and facilities, I think, through brands and retailers, through the compliance, the collaborative initiatives, are starting to look at different tools and approaches by which they can gain assessment, whether that's a virtual audit, whether that's obviously a follow-up audit, which has been conducted for many, many years by the profession, whether it's a due diligence assessment. So is there a role for APSCA and its firms and auditors to play that is recognized through a policy mechanism? I mean, that's one thing. The other piece, which Rana, you're very good about communicating broadly to the membership, is this is a continuous improvement process. Avidis talked about this as a relatively young profession, which it is. And the improvements and the progress, certainly over the last 2 decades, but accelerated this last couple of years, has been tremendous. But we can't do this alone, and what we really need is the community around APSCA to provide feedback, to provide critique, to identify opportunities and suggestions on how we can strengthen this. And there are a multitude of avenues to get that message back to APSCA through the various boards, through the firms, through the director at the apsca.org email. But we really want to hear from and listen to you about how we can continue to strengthen the profession and improve the value of your association.
Great. I think, Rona, you want me to go next? Yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't get my mute off. Thank you.
No worries. So as a representative of the retailers and brands on the stakeholder board who has wanted auditor professionalization for the last 15 years, I guess I would sum up my advice in 3 words, and that is stay the course. As Rona mentioned, this is the 6th attempt at auditor professionalization, and I'm delighted, and the Home Depot is delighted that it has been proven successful so far. We believe that APSCA continues to provide a standardized training and qualification process for member firm auditors, and that it will have a positive impact on the professionalism, resulting in overall improvements to the entire responsible sourcing or audit space. So for 2021, we look forward to the expansion into additional languages and expect the expected significant growth in those CSCAs as APSCA continues to build on just another very successful year. So congratulations to everyone.
Right, thanks. Abadis?
Indeed. Well, the pioneers have spoken, and they have spoken wisely. I'll mash their advice together and sort of maybe synthesize something from it. Todd said, stay the course, and Mark talked about understanding the changes that have been wrought around us, and some of which we are ourselves bringing to bear on the industry. I think I hear that to mean, the course that we're staying is that North Star that we've all referenced and Todd called out, the professionalization of this space. We're not trying to be anything other than that, but that is a lot to live up to. But to do that right, we have to recognize that some of the ideas that we may have come to the table with 5 years ago may not be appropriate to carry forward that mission today, and new ones are needed in light of what COVID has taught us, in light of what other realities are bringing to bear, and in light of technology that now is available to us. So we stay the course with regards to that central mission, but we remain adaptive, we remain nimble, we remain innovative with regards to how it is that we are going to serve the industry in staying that course, in meeting that large goal. And in some sense, again, both Todd and Mark have brought this out, and it's reflected in a couple of the slides you've shown, Rona, that Goodrich quote, which I really like, learning from sort of those past exercises. I love how you put it. They weren't failures; they were essentially stepping stones, and they bear gifts to us to learn from, and to sort of advance from. And the other theme for the whole series of the AGMs last week and this week, which I know was coined by your colleague Kelly Jo, facing the future together. Wonderful idea. Mark spoke about the need for community. And if ever there was a time where that is not only a good idea, but really an essential idea, it is now, as we all continue to suffer the ill effects of this pandemic. And we look around to the waste it is laying to the retail landscape, and the devastation it is causing to our space and to the consumer space at large. If you look and see which are the players that are coming out of this in better shape, we're all hurt. No one's coming out of it unscathed. But those of us that are doing a better job, those that are doing a better job dealing with this than others, are the ones who have those strong networks, who have been able to have a relationship with their suppliers, with their audit partners, with their various other stakeholders, creating a community that is enabling them to withstand the shock of this experience better than those who were more isolated beforehand. So this truly is something that has to be done together. We're all in this together. We're all going to come out of this together. So that's sort of the sum up of the advice. Stay the course, recognizing that to stay the course, you have to sometimes trim the sails and adjust your specific tactics at the moment, because you're looking at that lodestar and not really, that's what you're really aiming for. So I will add my word of congratulations to Todd and Mark's. It's truly been an incredible 5 years. It's been a privilege to be a part of it, and looking forward to the next chapter and to seeing that 3%, that 139 become 1,390 and then 3,910 or whatever the number combination will be, just to more and more success.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks very much to all three of you for the advice. I've got many notes down here, and certainly we'll be taking you up on that and be making it as part of our plans for 2021. So thank you very much. I want to ask you to stay on camera if that's okay. We're just going to transition into our Q&A session right now. And as Emma continues to consolidate the questions that have come in, so those of you that are on the call, please do continue to submit those questions. And we will consolidate all questions and distribute those. If you haven't had a chance to look at the annual report, I believe Kelly Jo's attached it as a handout. Again, to your pane, there's a little spot that says handout. You can either download it there, or you can go to our website. The 2021 AGM and stakeholder event is, I think, the most prominent thing on our website at the moment. You can certainly find it there, along with 5 other webinars that we pre-recorded and put those up. There's a welcome, strategy, membership achievements, exams, and ethics and integrity. So I'll encourage you to have a watch to learn more of that. We are now going to go into our Q&A. I think, Kelly Jo, I think you got the first one there.
Yeah, I'll get us started if you give me just one moment. And this first question actually will be going to Carol. Carol, the question that we received was, can you describe the process when you receive an anonymous complaint versus one from a firm? You're on mute, Carol.
Got it. Thank you. So regardless of where we receive the allegation, the first thing that we're going to do is determine whether it's credible, and we'll review it for, whatever evidence is provided to us. Do things connect, to make it a viable and a credible allegation? And it doesn't matter whether it's an anonymous or from a person. We're going to give it the same critical eye when it first comes into us. And APSCA and the member firm is not going to, they're going to dismiss any allegation that is not supported by clear evidence. That's very critical. And the other really important point I want to make is that if we find that a person has provided us with an allegation that is not in good faith, that itself is a violation of our code and would be brought to the disciplinary board. So, I just want to ensure and make certain that people know that we do have safeguards in place to make sure that only credible claims actually make their way through the disciplinary process for APSCA.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, just looking at one other question, and maybe this is one for Ron and Abadis. The question asks, as we advance the levels of professionalism, there will be upward pressure on costs. Will brands, retailers recognize that prices will potentially increase?
Yeah, so I think we kind of alluded to a degree of that during Abadis's presentation in the panel, or spoken about in the panel. And certainly as APSCA are implementing the examination process, even just the membership process, one of the things I think it's important to be aware of is our costs are actually very, very low. So our annual membership fee for individual auditors is just $100 per person. And then each one of our exam fees, which you only have to sit and pass the exam once. So assuming that you do sit and pass the exam on the first go, part 1 is $60, part 2 is $60, part 3, which includes a one-on-one interview, is $325. But I think in the scheme of things, when I look at other professional organizations, certainly $100 a month, or a year, sorry, not a month, a year is actually really, really quite low. And so we are very, very cost conscious. And we're also aware of, as APSCA are setting about providing value to the industry, we are, yes, establishing some level of cost through annual membership fees and through the individual examination fees, but I also think through the duplication of efforts, which Avadi spoke about, and I'll give him a moment to mention that again. I think that we are also working to remove costs from the profession as well. But you know, we are here to add value. Avadis, I'll let you.
Yeah, thanks, Rana. Not too much to add to that. I think you've identified sort of some of the core economics at play here. There will be a certain amount of costs added because we have to establish a credible system, the examination process as you described it, but they are minimal costs. And I can tell you certainly when you compare to other professional organizations, they are indeed very, very reasonable. Plus you mentioned the countervailing side, which is the reduction in costs from the need for multiple trainings that otherwise would have existed without that foundational piece. What I will add to the discussion, if I heard the question correctly, Kelly Jo, it was premised on the advancement in the levels of professionalism as being the lever that is raising price, and that in itself seems to me inherently to acknowledge that you are actually getting an increase in value. The value proposition for what an audit represents and how much trust you can have in it, how much story you can put by it, how much of your due diligence you can drive by it are going to increase because of APSCA. And that to me suggests that in a normally functioning market, that value proposition therefore will command a higher price perhaps than it does today. So without getting into the antitrust elements, Rana's absolutely right, of course. APSCA is not going to play a role at all in that. We won't go there. But the natural functioning of the market, if you see an exercise that is improving the value of a product, really should mean that that product will then be able to command a higher price in the market. And I trust the market to evaluate that appropriately, and I will be happy to depend on that to determine where things will settle down, recognizing, as Rana did, that there are some competing economics, some additional structural costs, but also some reduction of costs, which will interplay to give us a higher value product at the end of the day. So that's where I will leave that.
Thank you both, all valid points. The other question we received was, auditors who fail an exam are moved straight down to APSCA and it's causing us problems when scheduling audits. Would APSCA consider having a grace period for auditors to move to APSCA so this doesn't happen? Maybe that's one for Avadis or Rana?
I'll start, and Avadis, you can chime in if that's okay. So we actually talk about this in all of our webinars for the exam, that you know there is that that move down if you don't pass the exam, and also you move down if you don't sit the exam by the due date. And I think part of the reason for that, and part of the reason that we established that in the very beginning, was to the point that Todd, Mark, and Avadis brought up, is that trust and confidence. During this startup phase, and as we mentioned earlier, the registered level or the RA level auditors are treated the same as a certified auditor. Now, when you receive an audit report, so when Todd receives that audit report and it has the RA level status on there, he wants to have confidence. He wants to trust what that RA level status actually means during this interim process. And so by knowing that that level means that the auditor is going through the examination process, it means that if they are advanced in a level that we're offering the exam in, that they have actually set the exam by that due date and they've passed that exam. That gives that level of trust and that level of confidence in the audit reports that they're receiving. If there's no penalty to move an auditor, and I totally understand the challenge, is that, you know, at the point that you find out the auditor failed the exam, the moving down is instantaneous. Even though on paper we do move them down instantaneously, but as we mentioned before, we do have a look at if somebody reports that an auditor did an audit as an ASC, we have a look. One, what day did they get notified about that ASCA? was it, a day, before or after the audit actually took place? Did they do the audit believing that they were an RA at that time? We have that sort of grace within there. We would never take them, say, to the disciplinary board if they got notified on the 17th of May that they had failed the exam and they conducted an audit on the 18th of May, right? We do have that sort of internal grace period that we provide. And also, it might be somebody may get an audit report 2 or 3 months later, and they may report it to us and say, well, that auditor was an APSCA. And we may say, no, actually, they were an RA at the time that they set that exam. We don't necessarily go into the, whole story about, where they failed an exam or they didn't sit an exam by the exact time, but we do actually look at that whole bigger picture. So by default, they're getting a grace, but they do actually get moved down at the same time that the results get issued. Avadis, do you want to have something to add with that?
Yes, and funnily enough, I'm going to sound like a one-trick pony because my answer to this is much the same as my answer was to the previous question. I think to me it boils down to a value proposition discussion, right? You've mentioned, I think, the mechanics of it very well, and certainly I think provide the very reasonable approach that APSCA takes to handling the tightness of timelines and the recognition that an audit once scheduled while the person met the qualifications can't be easily rescheduled when you find out a day before the audit that the exam was not passed. But the broader question for me is, why do we have these exams and what is the value proposition of passing that examination? We're trying to professionalize this industry. We're trying to make it so that not anyone can just call themselves a social auditor. That comes with the requirement that there be a bar, a certain test that has to be met before you can give yourself that designation, right? Among his many achievements, my colleague Mark is a CPA, certified public accountant. I happen to be an attorney. A part of the value proposition of that CPA or my license to practice law is the fact that we have to pass an exam that not everybody passed. Not everyone who took it passed that exam, and that's what gives it value. So we understand the heartache it causes, and we are, to your description, Rana, adapting to be reasonable about the timelines. But in the end, our purpose here is to make sure that everyone who meets that qualification gets to have value from the process. And what that means is there has to be a consequence to not passing the exam. Otherwise, it loses its meaning, it loses its value. So I understand the short-term pain it may cause and the individual case heartache, but for the profession as a whole, for the space at large, it actually is a good thing that we have consequences to failing the exam, because that is what is going to elevate the process, the profession, and give value to that CSCA designation.
Thank you, Avadis. And we have also received a question regarding CPD. So this will be one for Rana. The question asks, regarding CPD hours, do you have a specific template for audit firms to use, or can we use our own internal document to demonstrate?
Right. So one of the things that we are doing is we're working with IT to establish a method to submit the information. So for an audit firm perspective, if you have, standardized testing, which are not testing, training, which I'm sure you already have, we're going to give you a template to fill out, an online template to fill out to provide information about the training, what elements of the competency framework are being covered, how do you validate that the individual auditors that participated gained the knowledge that you are expecting them to gain out of that. So all of that is being developed, and we'll be giving you more information about that in January. We're working with our IT people right now. Then with regard to the individual auditor, on each one of their profile, there will be a page for them to upload their continuous professional development information. What we are working to do as well is as you provide, as an audit firm, as you provide your information, and we allocate a certain number of hours to that, we're working with IT on a way that it can be, you know, whether you provide us with a list of people that participated in that training and it can be uploaded, whether the individual auditors need to upload some sort of a certificate, that's still in the finer stages of working with IT on how we can handle that. And we'll let you know as soon as we can. But again, we want to be as efficient as we can with all of the auditors. And also, you know, we're dealing with 4,400, nearly 4,300 auditors at the moment. We want to be as efficient as possible with our small and mighty team. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Rana. One other question, and this will be an ethics one, so this will be going to Carol. How many times has the disciplinary board met, and has anyone had their membership revoked? You're on mute.
There we go.
There we go.
Thanks, Kelly Jo. The disciplinary board for member auditors has met a total of 7 times. They have reviewed 23 cases, and in 17 of those cases, the allegations have been substantiated. And out of that 17, we've had 9 auditors who have had their APSCA membership revoked.
Great,
Okay.
Thanks for that.
Well,
I think that's wrapping up the questions that we've gotten to date. If anyone has anything to add, now would be the time.
Yep, I just wanted to ask Todd or Mark. I mean, there's been a lot of questions that we sort of covered that had a lot to do with trust and confidence, and, you know, particularly between, you know, whether it was a cost, whether it was the value add, whether it was the examination and the moving down. I just wanted to sort of throw that out to you. If you had anything additional that you'd like to add from your different legs of the stool. We've heard wonderfully from Arvides from a collaborative program perspective.
I can jump in here from an independent perspective and perhaps a bit of a hat from my prior role. I think I'll underscore a couple of things. You know, if we think about this as a journey and as a process of continuous improvement, when we look at where we were 20 plus years ago, we all had our own programs, we all had our own trainings, we had sort of a trust but verify approach, and there was an incredible amount of effort put to really, in a sense, monitoring the monitors. I think fast forward 20 years, there's a lot less of that and far more reliance on certainly the output of auditors that are going through the APSCA program and firms that subscribe to the process. And I think the other thing, the other value that continues to arise is the fact that you start to see mutual recognition between different programs. So we're also creating value at the factory level and elsewhere, where you can minimize the number of audits. You can recognize more singular approaches across the spectrum. And I think ultimately, you know, in a perfect world, everything gets harmonized and we have one program and one code and one profession that's able to support that. And, you know, step by step, we're sort of heading in that direction. And I think we're going to see some kind of an acceleration, because as we come out of this current health and economic environment that we're in right now, there is absolutely going to be a focus on efficiency and productivity. And underpinning all of that is that trust and confidence factor that we talked about.
Yeah, I don't know that I can say it any better than that, Mark. I think for us, you know, the ability to have further trust in the process, in our partnerships with the audit firms, having that accountability aspect to it as well, just further solidifies everything we believe in APSCA, and look forward to, you know, the continued growth of the program.
Great, thanks very much to all of you. Just before, I'm going to hand over to Arvides in a second to see if he has any final words of profound words as Avadis. We're all used to Avadis providing to us. But just quickly, if you haven't already subscribed to our newsletter, I encourage you to do that. We've really, Kelly Jo does an amazing job of managing our monthly newsletter and getting that out with Heath's support. But it is our main way of trying to communicate. We don't spam you. You get one email a month with regards to our newsletter. It's a way we try to keep everybody as updated as possible with all the work that we're doing. Also to visit our website, again, our Stay Updated page, our resource library. We contain a lot of information, and all of our newsletters are put there as well. As Mark mentioned earlier, we've also got our director email box, which is monitored by all of us on the team, so that we can be as responsive as possible to any questions that you may have. If you do think of additional questions that you didn't ask us here today, please feel free to just email the director and we'll get a response to you straight away. Follow us on social media. We do appreciate your help and support that way. And I just want to thank you very much for joining us, and then hand over to Avadis for the final sign off and farewell.
Thank you, Rana. You're far too kind. I don't know about profound words, but I do have profound gratitude to express to a number of people. As I mentioned in a different context a little while ago, the importance of the community that we've been able to forge around APSCA has been more critical this year than ever before. And in fact, yeah, as we've all experienced, this year has been crazy, is I guess the only single adjective I can think of in that would describe it. To see the teams at stake here, the stakeholder board, the executive board, APSCA's own team, really step up in an era of tremendous challenges and uncertainty, to continue to be able to hold our regular monthly meetings, for example, on Zoom instead of being able to do so in person, to be able to drive forward the mission as we have to get to that 139, that 3%, continuing to have all the exams, has taken tremendous extra effort. And I am truly, truly grateful to all the members of the stakeholder board, to all the members of the executive board who have really served above and beyond the call of duty this year. And more than anything else, to you, Rana, and Kelly Jo, and Carol, and Emma, and everybody else within APSCA for really stepping up. Thank you also to folks who have been giving of their time to attend this session and the various others we held this week and last. You recognize the importance of this, you understand the value it brings, and you're contributing to that achievement that we all want to see. It truly is a privilege to be a part of the executive board, the stakeholder board, to work with the likes of Todd and Mark and all the other great colleagues we have. I'm grateful for the opportunity and really thankful for the challenge that APSCA has been able to stand up to, not just with regards to how difficult this year has been, but with tackling this big issue of professionalizing the industry and going about it so well. Looking forward to continuing that journey. Thank you to all of you for your roles in it, and looking forward to 2021 and hoping for a better year than 2020.
Thanks very much, Avadis.
Thanks, everyone.
And thanks again, Todd and Mark. We appreciate it. And to Cheyenne from GoToWebinar for keeping us all technicalities free, technical difficulties free. Clearly words evade me, but thanks very much. Have a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to everybody, and look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.